Hello, everyone, and welcome to episode 72 of the WatchRolling podcast. The WatchRolling podcast is a veteran-owned podcast that focuses on horology from a veteran's point of view, as well as sharing valuable veteran resources with the watch enthusiast community. My name is Jason. I'm your host. If you're new to the pod, welcome. And if you're returning, welcome back. So this is kind of a special episode. If you can tell, I have my new little studio behind me. I still got some dust on my mic that I haven't. I guess I got to clean off. It's part of having a dog. I think my dog gets up here and does his own podcast when I'm not around, but I can't prove that. But you can see the new studio behind me. Got some lighting, some painting done. It's pretty cool. Set up the camera slightly different. I'm enjoying it a lot. But it's nice to be back. It took a 2 week break to get this stuff done. It seems to work out okay. And yeah. So this week's episode, as always, is brought to you by the Anti-Watch Watch Club. The Anti-Watch Watch Club is a 501c3 charitable organization that utilizes a drop style culture to provide all kinds of benefits to veterans, Leos, first responders, and the like. They do it through a drop style culture with stuff like Nalgene bottles, t-shirts, flags, rash guards, you name it. And it's an organization that does great things for the community we referenced, and they don't take a salary doing it. So I invite you to check them out, antiwatchclub.org, and buy something, help out the community. The pod is also brought to you by Mushi Watch Straps. Mushi Watch Straps is a veteran-owned business that features a whole bunch of stuff. Watch rolls, my personal favorites, the canvas watch rolls with suede liners. They got 4 pockets, a nice little leather strap that ties around, keeps your watches safe. They got my favorite gray fluted nylon strap. We just call it the Mushi strap. It's awesome, 20 millimeters. That gray is just like chef's kiss. It makes everything look great, frames a watch wonderfully. And it's veteran owned by Rob, who's an Air Force veteran. I don't get any kickback from either one of the organizations that sponsor the podcast. I was like putting the word out because they're good people doing good stuff. And feel free to use the code VET10 at Mushi Watch Straps for 10% off your entire order. Can't stress it enough. Awesome watch rolls. I'm telling you, you can do anything you want to with them. So check them out. Mushi Watch Straps and the Anti-Watch Watch Club. So this week's episode, I always feel like the interviews are special. And this week's episode is no different. This special episode is going to be an interview from Joel over at Stoic Movements on Instagram. So I know a lot of the people that I follow and that we follow each other and interact with actually followed Joel's feed. And Joe's feed is pretty cool. It discusses stoicism, but not like in a lecturing manner where he's like, be a stoic. No, it's more like the intersection of time and stoicism and then cool EDC shots. I always love a good flat lay. And Joe's got like the flat lays, like he's got it locked in. He's batting like 300 on flat lays. It's pretty sweet. And for those of you who don't watch baseball, 300 is a wonderful batting average. So before you at me about 300, no, that's you bat 300 for 15 years, you go to the Hall of Fame. It's like hands down what's going to happen, right? So, and it's just a great pod. It's a great feed because it's in my opinion, it brings positivity to social media in a day and age where there's so much negativity, in a day and age where so much of the stuff is fluff. And I'll be honest with you, like the majority of my stuff's fluff. I mean, it's like watch rolls, it's like wrist shots, it's like loom reels. I don't ever drop anything deep or meaningful in there, very rarely. And every time I go to Joel's feed, it's a wonderful quote. He cites his quotes, which is awesome. And then there's a cool flat lay with watches and other stuff. So I invite you guys to check out Joel's Instagram feed, which is Stoic Movements on Instagram. And without further ado, let's get Joel on the pod because you're not here to hear me run my mouth. You're here to hear Joel talk. So without further ado, here's Joel from Stoic Movements. Hey Joel, how you doing?
What's going on, Jason?
Not much, man. Not much. Welcome aboard. I'm glad to have you on. Let's see. So, I gave everybody the intro on your feed. Let's just discuss a little bit. Well, first, before I forget, I was going to forget. Let's do a wrist check. What do you have on your wrist tonight, Joel?
Is a Spinnaker hole diver.
Oh, wow. Nice.
Leather strap, which I literally just got finished making this morning.
Oh, you made the strap.
I made it. Yeah.
Oh, wow, man. Well, I need to know, like, let's hear it. How do you do it?
Well, I just started tinkering and buying leather and experimenting with different kinds of leather and, trial and error. This is probably like my first prototype with nothing on it that really prevents it from being used. So it's like prototype 1, but I think it's like my 3rd iteration that I went through to finally get one to work how I wanted to.
That's awesome. I appreciate anybody that can I'm not very handsy. Like I can draw and paint and stuff. But like manufacturing things, isn't really in my wheelhouse. I think I could learn from someone like maybe and figure it out, but um, so I'm always like super impressed when people are like, "Oh yeah, I made a strap or I made a buckle or brushed this or did that." That's pretty awesome. It's what kind of leather is it if you don't mind me asking?
It's Horween.
Okay. Yeah, I've
So
heard of that.
I think the tannery is in Chicago. Don't quote me, but it's a U.S. tannery.
Oh, nice.
Um, so yeah, it's black leather on the outside, and then I have some thinner brown leather as a liner on the inside.
Nice. How many millimeters thick is it? Because my thing is with leather, I get really warm and it makes me sweat, but I noticed thinner leathers tend to do a little bit better on my wrist.
I feel like maybe it's around 3 or 4 millimeter.
Oh, that's not bad.
It's
No.
not like maybe 5. It's not incredibly thick. One thing that I've realized, if you have thick leather and the case to wherever the holes are in your lugs is not thick enough, you're going to have issues seating the spring bars. So you almost can't really use a thick
Yeah.
leather, or you have to skive it down. So that was actually one of the lessons I learned. But
Awesome, man. Yeah, I watch a lot of videos on shoes because I got problems. And
no, it's really interesting watching
oh
how
yeah.
like, really high quality leather shoes are made. It's so cool.
Yeah. I found a channel that's out of Japan and they upload, I think, like once every 3 months. And they do not talk the entire time. It's just the shoe making.
And they don't
It's
have to talk.
it's amazing, bro. Yeah, like you're just sitting there like I get a glass of wine and I'm just like being all fancy watching these shoes get made. Have you seen that channel Red Dead Restoration?
I haven't.
Okay. You'll like it. If it's a watch restoration and the dude never talked.
You said it's a watch restoration.
Yeah, watch restoration.
So I haven't seen that, but periodically I'll see videos on Instagram or Facebook where they'll have like a Rolex that was like dropped
Yeah.
outside and they found it a year later. That is really sick to see how they
Yeah.
really restore it.
Yeah, and there's cool ones like Wristwatch Revival. He talks and walks you through it and tells you the story. And I like that one for the opposite reason I like. But Red Dead Restoration is a guy who you never see him. You just see his hands and he does like cool like videos and like has sound effects. But for the most part, it's just the watch restoration with he might type up like what he's doing, but he doesn't talk. And it's just I don't know, I think it's pretty cool. But
Sounds
it's kind of
relaxing
like,
to be honest.
huh?
I said it sounds relaxing, like to watch that
Yeah.
because very
Yeah. It's if I had and the worst part is it's not boring though, because you learn like he even has like a video where he breaks down how I think it's how an automatic movement works as you put it together kind of thing. And it's really because like his videography is great and you can see everything, it's just and it's like super chill. Like if you were having a rough day and you're like, oh man, I'll put on Red Dead Restoration. I'll have a great day
I'm
the
gonna
rest
have
of
to
the day.
check that out
Yeah,
for
I think
sure.
you'll like it. Oh no worries. On my wrist is my Mula Gashuta 10th anniversary SAR timer on the OEM bracelet, which I'm digging. Oh yeah, here.
Now
It's
what is that bezel made out of?
it's rubber. It's red with a black rubber insert.
That is interesting.
Yeah, yeah. It's a so they have another version of this as a full loom dial. Man, I'll share a link with you after we get done. Mula Glashuta has some interesting stuff, man. It's good stuff. This thing, but now this one's beefy. This version's a little beefy, but I have a 7.5 inch wrist, so on my wrist I think it looks fine. But I love it. It's my one, like I say, pop a color watch. But yeah, 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 yeah. But so now we got the wrist check out of the way because I tend to forget those. Let the audience know a little bit about yourself, Joel. Like, what do you do, and then we'll lead that into your Instagram feed and your watch enthusiasm part.
So I spent like a year in law enforcement. Before that, I did private security. After that, I did private security, and now I'm doing asset protection for a retailer, a really big retailer.
Oh, nice.
So basically, catching shoplifters, building intelligence on like ORC entities and everything like that. It's more than just like the whole grabbing shoplifters thing that it used to be back in the day. It's kind of getting a lot more organized and smarter, kind of
Yeah.
focusing on the big picture, fences, larger entities rather than just individual shoplifters.
Yeah. No, it's important because I've always felt like when you don't have any rules, it's easier to progress than it is when you have rules, right? Like if you don't have to, you know what I mean? Like if there was one soccer team that didn't have to follow any rules, I'm pretty sure they'd be scoring like 46 goals, and the other team would be like, "Well, I gotta get permission to do this first, and I gotta do," you know what I mean? Like
Yeah.
legally. So no, it's interesting stuff. And so, um, did that lead you into your watch enthusiasm? Did it have any part to play with it, or were they?
No, I have always, well, I don't want to say always. So my, I don't want to say obsession, but my interest in watches probably started in like fourth or fifth grade.
Oh
Grew up
wow,
in a community where most people had money. We didn't, but most people did. And this kid on the school bus had a Coke bezeled Rolex GMT Master 2. And he was like a grade above me.
yeah,
Family, really nice kid, really nice family. Wasn't really flashy with it. He didn't talk about it. I asked him, "Hey, that's what kind of watch is that?" Because I had like a G Shock.
yeah,
So he explained it to me. I'm like, "That's cool." And literally from that day forward, I was like looking at watches. I was googling them. And then of course the James Bond movies with the Omega Seamaster. So that was like, ooh, what kind of watch is that? So
yeah.
that's where it really started.
Awesome. Yeah, G Shock. Do you remember what kind of G Shock you had?
I don't remember. In fact, the first one might have even been like an off-brand one from what used to be called the Sports Authority.
Yeah, yeah.
I remember I killed it. I put it in water and it died. So I don't even think it was a real G-Shock.
Oh, yeah, man. I remember my first the first watch, and I'm ashamed to I was in high school though. But I grew up in Southern California, so I went to TJ in Tijuana, and it was a mother of pearl dial Gucci watch. And I wore that thing. It lasted like a year and a half, I think 2 years. And I thought I was just king, you know what, with that thing on. I was like, oh man, this thing's so great. But I didn't really understand watches and all that stuff. And then, coming in the Navy, I just had G Shocks, almost always exclude, but they were just easy to get, $90, even cheaper back then. And they would just last you forever and you could beat the crud out of them. But yeah, awesome, man. Sports Authority. I forgot that so many of those stores had like licensing deals with companies to make like watches. I remember seeing, now that you bring it up, because I remember like Big Five Sports would have Big Five Sports watches. And,
Mhm.
I think Foot Locker even had a couple of Foot Locker watches at the time, kind of thing. It's interesting the things that you forget about. um, so okay, so yeah, you were always interested in watches since you were young. Man, what kind of school bus was that for the kid to have a Coke bezel
Just
GMT?
a normal school bus, and nobody, obviously we were all kids, so
Yeah,
none of us knew what it was. But like, I talked to the kid a lot, and I'm like, you're the only one that's wearing like a all metal watch, and I was
yeah.
interested by it, so I asked him, and he explained it to me. So,
It'd be crazy if that guy still had it.
um, I don't remember because he always wore pretty cool watches. I think he switched to a tag at one point. In my opinion, that's a downgrade a little bit. But yeah, he every like few years his parents would buy him like a new watch.
Yeah. Oh man, man.
But he
Yeah.
was always a good kid. He never flaunted it. He never made fun of
Yeah.
anybody that didn't have money. So that was something that was really interesting about him is you get a kid wearing like a watch like that, but he also was brought up in a way not to like flaunt and make people feel bad for not
Yeah.
having something like that.
Yeah. It's pretty awesome when you yeah, because I mean, I'm sure you've been to like watch meetups and stuff, and sometimes people are kind of funny, and you're like, dude, you gotta watch. It's not like you're freaking curing cancer, bro. Like
Yeah.
chill out. You know what I mean? Kind of thing. You're like, are you serious? But yeah. So watch enthusiast from a young age. Went to school with a kid who had an awesome watch collection. and wasn't a jerk about it. So how did that lead up into this your Instagram feed, which and you heard my introduction. I'm a firm believer in that. It's just an awesome feed, man. And I feel like you get a lot of bang for the buck with your feed, right? Because you get a little stoic principle, you get some cool shots. How did that all lead up to that?
Well, so I wasn't always into reading about Stoicism. I knew it was a thing. And then I kind of went through a period where I was consistently agitated on a daily basis. And as I said, I'd heard about Stoicism, and I kind of just thought, well, I need to make a change. I'm not going to be able to change things that are happening to me or around me, which means I'm going to have to change my thought process on things and
Yeah.
how I kind of address them and manage it and react to it. So I started reading Stoic quotes, uh, then Googling their explanations on exactly what was this dude talking about.
Mhm.
Because a lot of the time, if you take direct quotes from like people from a really long time ago, it might not make sense right off the bat.
Mhm.
So I would look that up, and then I saw the book The Daily Stoic,
Yeah.
which literally a page every day. It's like a calendar for Stoic quotes, and then at the bottom is also kind of an explanation or maybe how to apply it to that day or that week or what have you. And there's a companion journal to it as well that I don't know if a lot of people buy, but I recommend getting it. Oh, there you go. There you go. So it's
Yeah.
almost like an exercise. So now you get a quote and you're thinking about it and you're reading the author's explanation of the quote. And then you're being asked a question to apply it to your life. More often than not, you're probably going to be applying it to a situation that happened recently. And then it gives you a small section, which it's interesting that they make it a small section as opposed to, a large section where you can go on and on. It kind of really puts you in a situation where you need to sum up what you want to say, which is kind of
Yeah.
a stoic kind of thing as well, to not be as reactive and be more introspective and then write what you want to write. So I started doing that, and I saw a lot of improvement, and a lot of it kind of happened in the way that happens when you start going to the gym, where it's not necessarily a drastic change, but gradual and day by
Yeah.
day, month by month, till a year later, when something happens that you would have normally ruined your day, ruined your week, you would have just been pissy about it, and I found myself not. So that was kind of when I was like, "Oh, this is like pretty cool," and I keep doing it. Some days I don't have a chance to do it, but I still do it fairly regularly. And I'm also into watches, so I
Yeah.
follow a lot of watch Instagram pages. Watches of Espionage is a big one, and then through that page, a whole bunch of other pages. Your page. So one day I literally woke up. I'm getting ready to go to the gym, and I periodically took pictures of watches back then before I made this Instagram. And I'm like, what'd be really cool is if somehow I took like a nice picture of a watch, whether it be on my wrist or how I kind of kicked off the page doing it, kind of just a layout of the watch and maybe some other stuff. And what if I paired it with like a stoic quote for that day? And sometimes I'll have like an explanation of it as well, my own interpretation, sometimes
Yeah.
not. Um, so I kind of just thought about doing that, and one day I just said, you know what, let me just do it. Like, my goal isn't to like get IG famous or anything, but I like it, and I'm sure I'm not the only person that likes it.
Yeah.
So why don't I just go and do it? And I might meet some people. I might add some value to other people's lives. Uh, People might learn things. People might get into stoicism more, and so that's kind of how it got started. It wasn't necessarily like I thought about watches from stoicism. I liked them both, and then I kind of had the crazy idea of combining them.
Yeah. It works, man. I tell you what, it really works because I like a lot of people that will do long posts, right? But if I'm being honest, man, like I'm not on IG to read a soliloquy or a dissertation. You know what I mean? I do enjoy pictures. I enjoy videos. I know some people are anti-real. So that's why, like, if I do a reel, I'll post pictures immediately for it for the picture people, you know? Um, but like you've hit a nail on the head, man. It's like it's something that makes you think. And I also like how you said, like, sometimes you don't have, for whatever reason, you don't like read every single day, or you don't have a chance to like sit down with the journal. And that's why I've actually put my journal to the side until I finish meditations. I want to I want a baseline, right? I want a base, like a foundation to start from. And but like you said, like with the gym, it's a gradual change, right? So I'm pretty sure it's the same way. Like if there's a morning where you're busy and you don't get a chance to read it, you've done enough reading, you've done enough of this journal stuff to where you can still apply something you've learned, even though you didn't get to learn something that morning.
So
You know
here's
what I mean?
another interesting concept with that I kind of thought about when I kind of started lapsing. And I definitely read like a Stoic quote about it. I mean, probably multiple about action rather than just thinking, kind of a quote more along the lines of, not being paralyzed by the planning or the practice of something.
Mhm.
Just because you don't have a chance to journal about it, uh, doesn't isn't necessarily a bad thing. Maybe you're in the doing phase.
Yeah.
Maybe you're not in the planning, reflective phase. Maybe it's time to like put down the practice and actually do. So that was something interesting as well. And for people that like to journal, I journaled a little bit. Um, that's something to think about as well. Maybe not beating yourself up if you're having a good time and you're making progress and you're not doing your quote unquote homework and it's become homework.
Yeah.
You're doing. So I mean that's kind of the point.
Yeah. No, it's interesting fact, man, because there's so many different, it's like anything else, right? That you're gonna do. There's you can read and learn about it, or you can do it, or you can watch and learn about it. There's different ways to take it in. And everyone has different learning styles. Some people incorporate multiple learning styles. And yeah, it's just good job on the feed, man. Keep it up because I really enjoy it. And I've had like side conversations with people like, oh man, have you seen, I'm like, oh yeah, I follow the guy, you know what I mean? It's like it's awesome stuff, right? And and it's a I'll say it again, it's just a positive little part of Instagram. It's a positive part. And I appreciate that because I can only like see so much negative stuff. But so Joel, on this road with stoicism and watches, right? So for you, because I mean the broader question would be, can you explain? But I mean, none of us can explain the whole thing. But for you, what's the connection between stoicism and the concept of time as it relates to watches for you? Is there a connection there?
I mean, there's a little bit of a connection in that Stoicism, a lot of it talks about being in the present,
Hmm.
not worrying about what happened prior to where you're at or what's going to happen in the future. And I feel like how time or a timepiece or a device that keeps track of time relates to that is I mean, why were they created? It's for you to time manage, and right there, what is time management? It's showing an effort to stay in the present. So
Yeah.
that to me is kind of where they would intersect on a functional level.
Okay. Yeah, I think I know for me it's a reminder too, just to look down at my wrist sometimes and you're like, oh, like maybe I should get off my butt, and go do something, because I have a little thing when I get home. I like to just sit down for like 15 minutes and just like take a deep breath and chill out for a minute. And I'm glad I have a watch because my watch reminds me, yeah, you need to keep it to 15 minutes, bro. You got other stuff you got to do.
Well, also, and it might not only be watches, but for people like us that like watches, what do you do? Like you're wearing a watch, you put it on for a reason that day. That's kind of your flavor for the day or for the week. What are you doing when you're looking at your watch besides just looking at the time? You're kind of present.
Yeah.
Like you're looking at the watch, you're admiring it, you like how it looks, you're checking out the bezel, you're maybe turning the bezel. Just that object in itself, despite the time that it's telling you, is kind of keeping you present. You're not
Yeah.
imagining the future. You're not imagining the past. You're not nitpicking what you said yesterday. You're not worrying about what's happening tomorrow. You're just looking at your watch.
Yeah.
So that's
I
kind of something as well.
Yeah, it's kinda like stopping and smelling the roses, except just looking at your watch. Yeah, that's a
Exactly.
great point. That's a great point, man. I haven't thought, see? I just had a profound moment, courtesy of Joel on the podcast.
But it doesn't have to be just watches. There are people that have worry coins and that it does the same thing.
Yeah. Yeah, no, yeah, and it's interesting too because, like, I've seen that with, like, yeah, I think you can apply that to anything. I know people are, like, into knives and, you know, I
Listen, I like knives too. I just didn't make an Instagram for it.
yeah,
Opening and closing a pocket knife that has a knife action and a nice action, an Emerson, a Strider, a Benchmade,
yeah,
kind of keeps you present. It's like a cool fidget spinner.
yeah, yeah. I was gonna say is like people used to bust people about fidget spinners, but I mean, if they're actually paying attention to what they're doing, I guess it's not a bad thing, you know? Um, so that's no, that's a great point, Joel. So I had an interesting question, and it's one of my favorite questions to ask people, and I had to kind of like I thought about it too much before I wrote it down, but then I was like, no, just ask it. So are there any like what's a common myth about stoicism that since you've been involved that you like to share?
So I feel like the biggest myth, or what most people that haven't really read about it or learned about Stoicism, is that they just take it for the word Stoic. And to a lot of people, and even the definition, I didn't look it up, but more or less it's like not showing emotion, not, almost like a poker face kind of attitude, mentality, demeanor. And that's really not what Stoicism is about. It's you're never perfect in your study of Stoicism. There will be things that get to you. It's about that constant practice and being introspective and analyzing why you feel a certain way about things,
Yeah.
and analyzing why you react to things the way that you do. So it's not really the absence of emotion or feeling. It's actually more of the management of it,
Yeah. No,
and kind of a greater thought about it than just having it come out.
yeah. No, I agree totally. I looked up the definition. Like the first definition is a person who can endure pain or hardship without showing their feelings or complaining. So what it's telling you is that no, the person has feelings, they're just not demonstrating them at that moment, right? They're under control of their emotions and or they're not griping about it, which is which if I'm being brutally honest, like in the Navy, we always say a griping sailor is a happy sailor. I may take that to heart too much. There might be times where I'm just like, I got to get it out. And maybe I should just not get it out and just shut up, right? And move on, which I do more than I tend not to do. But no, it's yeah, it's been an interesting thing for me too because I've learned, my job as a firefighter and all that stuff. Like, there's a lot of pain, man, and it's hard. It's not an easy job, right? And then think about all the other jobs you have that aren't easy, where you're cold or you're hot or you're dirty or you're wet or like you're not around your family or um you're in an unpopular line of work or something like that. Like stoic principles can help you because you know if you already naturally are capable of enduring the pain and hardship without griping or being demonstrative in a bad way, maybe understand some stoic principles will help you further understand that, right, and make it a little bit easier than just kind of going through the motions on your own. No, that's pretty it's
Uh,
pretty
and it definitely helped me in that way too. So absolutely.
So yeah, you brought up earlier about like what's within our control. So, I did a little research, and a fundamental aspect of stoicism is understanding what's within our control and what's not. So, um, for you, how do you incorporate that to everyday life for yourself? And is that something that your watches help you understand sometimes? Not all the time. I wouldn't think of it all the time, but is it something that your watches tie into with you or your Instagram feed?
Um, I wouldn't say that really interfaces with my watch. Just goes back into the fact that when I look at it, it kind of keeps me more present. Not really anything much deeper, than that, and kind of my answer to that other question.
Yeah. It's interesting. Do you have any watches that have like a personal like story behind them? Like, do you have a piece that like maybe your spouse bought you or a family member gave or you got to commemorate an event? Because I would think that those kind of pieces might, as you learn these principles, um, make it a little bit easier to like go through the difficult times in your life. Maybe I don't know. For me, it might.
I haven't really had that yet. I mean, I haven't had a child born yet, but I'm sure that when I do, the watch that I'm wearing, that's going to be a story.
Yeah.
Um, so not really any stories. I know my last dog had passed, and I was
Oh,
wearing one of my watches, and I just remember it not in a negative way, but a positive way that he went home and everything like that, and I remember the watch that I wore, and I'm glad it was that one because I really liked that watch and it was cool. So it almost felt
yeah.
like I wasn't wearing a crappy watch that day. I was wearing a cool watch. But other than that, it was a
Yeah.
that's the Sangin Professional, the brushed tad
Okay.
limited edition that had come out.
Oh, nice. Nice. What was your dog's name, if you don't mind me asking?
Desmond,
Yeah. Shout out Desmond. He's up
yeah,
there doing good stuff.
it was awesome.
Yeah. Oh, what breed?
It was a pit.
Oh yeah, I love
It
pitties,
was a
man.
pit, so that's kind of why we got this one.
Yeah.
I kind of fell in love with pit bulls, and I'm good at, I guess, managing dogs that have a temperamental past. So that's
Yeah.
kind of like the thing that I'm doing now.
Yeah. I'm not even to be super esoteric, bro, but I think dogs know. I mean, I know dogs know. Like, I don't think I know dogs know. Like, my in-laws have a dog they rescued, and it's a pity mix, right? He had been feral for like 2 years, bro. Like where they lived, they knew who the city knew who the dog was. They just couldn't catch him. And so then they noticed he was walking funny because he had something wrong with his leg, blah, 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 blah. They were able to get him, sedate him, get him healthy, and he stayed in the dog pound for a while. And no one would adopt him because he was older and he was a pity. And so long story short, he had been there so long they were gonna put him put him under, or they were gonna, medically euthanize him. And they went to do it and the needle broke on his skin and didn't go in. So they were like, we're gonna give him 2 more weeks. In that 2 weeks, my father-in-law went in there, saw him, and they had an immediate kind of connection. And long story short, he's been with them since then. Um, he's really protective, but I'm like, yo, he was homeless, bro. Like this dog, like lives in a house now. Like, you think he wants to go back to the streets? Heck no. He knows he's got it good, so he's like really protective of the house. But he's just the kindest dog, man. He's nice. He's friendly, and the dog. I think they just want to feel safe, man, and be part of a pack. Have their family, and I think some people just have a natural ability to do that with some dogs. They know, there's like a mutual respect there. Like you're going to protect them and they're going to protect you and they're safe in the home. And I think I think it's awesome, man, especially for a breed that I think is really misunderstood. But we're not here to talk dogs, but I love
Oh, I could
pitties. And
talk about dogs all day. I'm a
yeah,
major dog person.
maybe I'll do an offshoot podcast. We'll call it a pause or something. I don't know, something crazy. But no, that's pretty good. Um, let's see. We talked about the passage of time, and that's a central theme of Stoicism. And then, does any of this stuff impact, like, have you given any thought? Is any of it going to impact current choices for pieces that you're going to pick up, right? Because I would think that some complications actually measure more time than the standard complications. So like perpetual calendars, or you know some of the other stuff is like super super duper expensive, like some of that crazy stuff that's doing like solar time and stuff like that. But has any of the stuff that you've been reading played a part in any maybe future purchases or stuff that you're looking at?
That's an interesting question, and now that you posed it, it might, because I never thought of it that way.
Yeah.
Um, Kind of being, the movement, or maybe the design being, symbolic of my, fondness for stoicism. I actually think that my taste in watches might have cued me being the kind of person that would like stoicism. So kind of a Tarantino with that. I've always liked tool watches. Not that there's anything wrong with liking flashier dress watches or watches with bling. Not my thing. I've always liked tool watches. So watches with an intended purpose, not overly flashy. Not that there's anything wrong with it. Um, but I feel like the kind of person that is into a time instrument, a tool watch, is probably the kind of person that would appreciate the logical and tool like thinking of stoicism. So, kind of like a reverse, like somebody that likes tool watches, if you start throwing stoic quotes at them, I feel like chances are they'll probably like vibe with it
Yeah.
because of how their mind works and what their preferences are. So I'd almost say it was a tip to the fact that I might like stoicism based off of the kinds of watches that I liked.
Yeah. No, I agree. I like that point you said about, people that are into tool watches, right, would probably understand that, being present in the moment. And, you know, I feel like that about a lot of because I have a lot of friends that are like no BS, what I call hands-on guys, right? They do woodworking, they're electricians, or they grew up like on a farm in Texas, or and they basically can do everything around their house because when they were a kid, they didn't have a choice, right? Like we can build the fence, we can put in wiring, all that stuff, right? But what I've noticed is a lot of them, um, just talking to them, it's the same thing for me. Like when I grew up playing sports, right? I loved playing basketball because it was the easiest sport to play by yourself, right? Like I just needed a ball and a hoop. I could shoot hoops by myself. I didn't need anyone there. I could go there for like 3 hours, practice layups, jump shot, whatever I want to do. Or just be a dork and shoot around. Football always required other people to tackle. Baseball always required someone to throw a ball, someone to field it. Soccer, I guess you could do stuff, but I'm 6'2", like 260, so they always wanted me to be a goalkeeper, and that kind of sucked. But like when hearing them talk, they always talk about how when they're doing their projects, that's what they're doing, and that they're present in that moment, and all they have to worry about is what they're doing right then and there. They don't have to worry about whatever's going on with their kids next week, or like you said, something that happened weeks ago. And I really do feel like people that are tool centric, right? They're almost always doing something with the tool that puts them in that zone, quote unquote. And I can see the alignment between like tool watch enthusiasts that actually use them, and
Mhm.
you know, stoicism. Because joking around, like yesterday, I had to paint my patio and a bunch of other stuff and mow the lawn because there was like a 30-degree temperature drop between yesterday and today. And I wore my Ranger on the Jubilee while I did all that stuff. I was like, screw it, bro. I like this watch. I'm wearing it while I'm doing all this work. Normally I would wear my Luminox or a G-Shock or something. Like, no, I'm not babying this thing. It's freaking Ranger on a Jubilee. I'm gonna wear it while I'm mowing the grass and painting stuff. And then I wore it later when I went and got a coffee after I took a shower and got all cleaned up. Right. It was just it's just and it's nice to have those tools with you because it's kind of like I used those tools when I was just busy doing work on something I needed to get done. And I wasn't worrying about what was going to happen 4 days from now or what happened 5 days ago. It was pretty it's a nice tie-in.
And it's kind of cool how you can use a tool watch in those, multiple different scenarios. You're doing yard work and then you're at a coffee shop getting coffee and it's the same watch.
Yeah. I'm not gonna lie. I looked down at my wrist when I was doing the painting. I was like, I gotta be the fanciest painter right now in the state. Like, no, I don't know if anyone's painting fancier than me right this minute, but yeah, it was fun. It was pretty funny.
Not if you got that on a Jubilee bracelet.
I know. I got a fleck of paint on the crystal, and when I was in the drive-through for the coffee, I was like, "Oh, there's some paint on my crystal. I guess I'll clean it off when I get home." I left it there for a while. It was interesting. So through all this stuff with stoicism, is there one like major lesson you've learned? I know you just discussed about like being introspective and stuff, but is there one critical lesson or important lesson that you've taken from it so far?
I'm trying to remember the quote. I have it on my whiteboard at work. and I usually change quotes out on my whiteboard, but that seems to always find its way there and stay there the longest. Um, God, I'm drawing a blank.
Oh, it's fine.
So the Marcus Aurelius quote about the resistance being the correct direction.
Mm,
I get it. I'm trying. You know what?
no, I know
Can you
what you mean. That's
know what
basically the
I'm talking about?
I get the gist of it, right? And you know what's funny? I'm glad you brought that up because and people will say whatever they want to say, but like, oh, you went in the Navy. Well, okay, yeah, yeah, is that a large group of people going the same direction? I guess so. But ever since I was a little kid, man, ever since I was a little kid, if
I
50
I
people are,
remember.
yeah, go ahead, go ahead.
I remember. The impediment to action advances action. What stands in the way becomes the way.
Yeah, yeah. And I've
Sorry, it
always,
just came
no,
to me.
no, I get it, man, because what becomes the obstacle becomes the way. Because if you're going to keep going forward, you don't have a choice, right? The obstacle is there. What do we do? Do we go over it? Do we go under it? Do we go around it? I wouldn't advise going through it unless you have proper tooling, but you know what I mean? Like it's 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 the same thing as like problems aren't problems, they're opportunities, right? And that's the way I feel about it. Like ever since I was a little kid, bro, like if 50 people are going a certain way, I naturally feel the inclination to stop for a second, just for a second, and figure out why is everyone going that way, right? Like, should I be going that way? Should we go in a different way? Um, and I've taken a lot of my work based off the fact that I like to solve problems. Like I don't care that they're there. It's fun to solve them. And and then you get like you feel pretty good when you solve a problem, right? When you do, yeah, man. That's a great quote. I might have to put that on a bookmark for myself or something like that. I like that. I haven't gotten that far yet. I'm reading where he is discussing in his journal what he takes from the people in his family. So from so and so I learned this, from so and so I learned that. Um and it dawned on me like I've done that with some of my friends. I should probably do a deep dive with my family of the stuff.
So
You
you're
know.
talking about meditations, correct?
Yeah.
So I haven't read the whole book. I picked at it. What's interesting, I don't know if it's true. I believe it is true. He never actually intended
No.
for anybody
Yep.
to really read that. That was
Yep.
his own personal journal, which is
Yep.
it. That's cool.
Yeah. And that's why I'm, reading it, it's like, man, dude, like to sit down, like, and I get it though, right? Like I'm a big fan of history, so I understand what's going on in Rome at the time, blah, 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 blah. Like, homeboy didn't have the internet. He didn't have television. I've been there, right? Like my first deployment, we didn't have internet. We didn't have anything except for maybe like VCR tapes and magazines. Like when you have a lot of time without a lot of distractions, you know, there's a lot to think about. But for this guy to put this stuff, the way he talks to himself and how in his writing he applies like when he talks about, you don't feel the need to prove everybody wrong. Like, don't tell them they're wrong. Next time you say a sentence, say it the way it should be said, and then maybe they'll pick up on it, right? Like he's even writing like that. He's not writing like, oh, my Uncle Steve's a jerk. No, he's like, from my Uncle Steve, I learned this, and I learned to not do this. And he's even doing like the Oreo sandwich of like positive, negative, positive, right? In his writing to himself. Right, so he's practicing what he preaches in the way he writes.
So I have a question.
Yeah.
So you use the companion journal. So right now you do some level of journaling. Have you done journaling prior to that?
No.
So what I've experienced, he was basically writing stoicism without probably thinking about it. Like, hey, this is gonna contribute to a philosophy one day. But it's interesting that when you have these conversations with yourself through paper, where you wind up going. I started journaling. I was a little bit younger, and it went from complaining to more of that introspective. So
Yeah.
it's not something that's like this person is like a prodigy or something like that. Yes, he has awesome works. He said great things, and um, anybody that journals eventually gets to that point where they develop that
Okay.
and find that.
Yeah, I think I might have attempted it at once, or I had thought about it, and I'm actually streamlining a lot of my life right now. Like a lot of like I had way more books than this. I'm like, dude, I read them, but when I don't have like a library in my house, right? And then I like even stupid stuff. Like I went through my socks. I'm like, what socks do I actually wear? And I'm like, all right, I can donate those other socks. I'm like systematically going through it and just like it's gonna sound ridiculous, but I really love mid-century modern homes. And the reason why I love them is because I've read enough to know there's a correlation between outside light and being able to see the outside in your home and the reduction of clutter. It's a tie-in they've learned through this style of architecture
That makes
that
sense.
it's some people go crazy and they have like very minimalist stuff in their house, but you literally have less clutter because you don't have anything interrupting your sight lines to see the outside, right? Because the homes are designed to bring the outside in without literally bringing the outside in. And I've just like lately been like, man, I got so much stuff just like laying around, and it's like it clouds my mind, it clouds my thinking. Um, it makes me feel like I got more crap going on than I really do, and it's like stuff that's not even super important. So I asked myself, like, what do I really want to learn? I really want to learn how watches operate. I know how they do, but I really want to learn it. Like I got the George Daniel watchmaking book my wife got me. I want to be able to sit down and read that. I want to be able to sit down and read the Stoic stuff. I want to get to the point where I'm doing the journal. I want to learn about Grand Seiko. I want to learn. That's it. So that's what's there, and that's what I'm going to do. And I'm going to sit my butt here every once in a while and read it. I'm going to get rid of the other stuff that's not super interesting to me, and I'm going to go from there because I feel like the other things are obstacles, but I can to go back to your point about impediments. Well, some of them you can just get rid of because they're not really You know, the action is removing them, you know what I mean? Because it's not one I need. And then the other obstacles will be like seriously learning watchmaking and how it works and how it operates. Cause I want to be able to speak intelligently from that. And it's just it's pretty cool stuff. Pretty interesting. So we talk, in the watch space, you kind of can't avoid quote unquote luxury pieces, right? And I don't I don't really like that term because I grew up a poor kid, and for me, like if I get to toast my bread on a sandwich, that's pretty luxurious. Um, if I'm being serious, like I had a toasted sandwich for lunch yesterday. I was like, man, this thing's so freaking good, right? Because as a kid, I would never have an air fryer to put my toast in, but now I got one. So, um, but so a lot of people will value luxury and the status that this gives them in the watch community. And a lot of stoic, some of the stoic values are detachment from external goods. So how have you balanced that between um, your perspective on your watches and their value, quote unquote? Like, has the stoicism helped you be able to balance that?
Um, I never really considered my watch's value. Um, when I buy a watch, it's not necessarily because it's scarce or because it's worth a lot. If I like it, I like it. If I don't like it, I don't like it.
Okay.
There's a lot of people that probably aren't really into watches, but they're into the status symbol factor.
Yeah.
Um, I would hope that, there's no judgment. If you like something, you like something. If it happens to be expensive, well, it's expensive. I mean, one of the major Stoics, Seneca, was filthy rich.
Yeah.
So having money doesn't make you any less in tune with Stoic philosophy, and your taste is your taste. But for me personally, I don't really. The value of it isn't a factor.
Okay. Yeah. And that's what I've learned too, as I've gone through with my collection, right? Is like my collection's actually gotten smaller over time. Like I'm almost down to like 5 pieces. There's there's one piece, the Marathon Pilot's Navigator my wife got me that I'm going to keep, and I'm going to do what I call put it to the archive. It's going to go in the archive section, and I'll break it out occasionally, but it's there for sentimental value. Um, but I'm almost down to like 5 pieces, just 5 core pieces because I like them so much. Like when I pick one up to wear, like when I wore this today, I was actually like kind of sad I didn't put on my Grand Seiko. I was like, oh man. But I'm like, oh, I only got like 5 watches, so I'll wear my Grand Seiko tomorrow, right? It's like it's kind of interesting. Value be damned, right? Because it's what they, it's what they, how I feel about wearing them to me. So, one interesting thing is, so the Stoic principle of self control. Um, how does that play with the occasional desire to own multiple wristwatches or possibly indulging in the watch enthusiast space?
So I've gotten a little bit better with that self control with a lot of help from my girlfriend, who who would like a ring someday soon.
Yeah,
So I don't think that there's anything wrong with indulging. Um, Obviously, one of the tenets of Stoicism is obviously not to like crave external things.
yeah,
But yeah, my answer to that is that I've got responsibilities now, and I have people to help me realize that.
yeah. No, it's nice, man, because sometimes you need that. You need that friendly little nudge. But I think maybe like being able to make your own straps probably helps, right?
Yeah, what it really stemmed from is I haven't found like a leather strap within my price point that I liked.
Yeah,
So like, well, why don't I just make my own? So I started on that.
man, that's got to be. I'm really pretty stoked for you for that, man. Because like I feel the same way about t-shirts because of my body size because I have like broad shoulders and I don't have like a huge gut. So like I have to like shop for shirts, and all my dress shirts I have to get tailored because to fit my shoulders they have like a huge waist and I don't have like a huge waist. And sometimes I'm like, man, I should just buy a sewing machine and sew my own crap. You know what I
Listen, that
mean?
can be a thing,
Yeah, you know what I mean?
you know. That's kind of where I might wind up going with it, though. Too, I might just, if I get good enough at it, start making them and throwing them up there for sale.
Oh yeah, man, I would. I'd buy one because make some for some Cartier tanks because my wife's been searching high and low for leather straps for Cartier tanks, so we'd be some customers. We'd line up for sure. So Stoicism discusses, it encourages us to cultivate wisdom, courage, justice, and temperance. So, you know, it could possibly be tied to like the watch you wear every day, but probably not. But how do you how how do you go about using any of those virtues in your daily life? Cultivating the wisdom, courage, justice, and temperance. And does any of them involve your watch enthusiast stuff?
It's a good question. I wouldn't say that they really tie into my watch. I pretty much just keep it simple when it comes to that. Being present, staying present.
Yeah,
Um, Temperance. Um, don't go spending a whole lot of money on watches.
yeah,
Uh, Temperance in how I react to things. Courage. I mean, I what I do for a living. You kind of have to have a little bit of that.
yeah,
Um, I wouldn't say a whole lot of thought goes into those four virtues, but I try to just live in a way that I'm not just reacting to things and there's a filter.
yeah. It's nice, man. Yeah, I do a pretty good job, but there's times where I have to like check myself. I'm like, yo, man, what are you doing? Like, you need to take a step back for a second. Just like Aaron Rodgers said, RELAX. Like, you just gotta relax. You know what I mean? But yeah, um, have you had any mentors in the Stoicism stuff? Is there anyone that you talk about, or is there anyone that you've read that you consider a mentor, maybe by proxy?
Um, Seneca, Epictetus, Marcus Aurelius. Obviously they're not mentors, but they're three of my favorites. Um, Kind of just myself and holding myself accountable. That when I read these things and I say to myself that this is something that I want to actually practice and put into motion, that I hold myself accountable to that.
Yeah,
and then I'm not just reading it and then forgetting about it. I apply it. Um, my girlfriend's kind of helped a lot with that too, because one of the things I was finding is that I tend to be not critical of myself in like I stink way or I'm bad at that, but just when I expect to perform a certain way and I don't, I'm hard on myself.
Yeah.
So my girlfriend there is kind of very helpful with that. Like, hey, listen, like we're gonna check this right now. So you weren't perfect in this, but you were very close to it. So I would say mentor, but a little bit of a help.
Yeah.
Um, when it came to like my Instagram, I wouldn't say I had mentors, but I definitely had people like that I could soundboard off of that kind of brought a lot of perspective for me. I don't know if you've ever heard of Matthew Vincent.
Yeah.
So I had at one point joined his, I want to call it a community that they have. So they have like 3 calls a week and then a call on Sunday, and they have a Discord where you can kind of talk with a whole lot of other people. And some of them are operating in the realm that you want to or are, some aren't. And they kind of put a lot in perspective. I said to them, hey, listen, I have this Instagram. I kind of want to develop it and blow it up. And there are a lot of tough conversations where, like, all right, well, you're saying you want to do this, but what are you doing? At that point, I really wasn't doing anything. And here you had some people like Matt and Josh from the group, and this dude Hanse and Elliot, and a bunch of them, and they were kind of like that, not tough love, but hey, you're saying you want to do these things, but what are you actually doing? Are you just
Yeah.
fantasizing about the idea of, really getting this page to, be seen by people and making it something bigger than it is right now? Or do you actually intend to do that? And kind of an accountability there. Um, so I'd say that those are probably the closest things to mentors. They're people that are
Nice.
successful in what they've done, and they're not just sugarcoating things. They're not just, oh, you're doing all right. No, like they're holding
Yeah.
me accountable to what I said I want to do. Um, so yeah,
That's more beneficial than people think. I mean, it's really, that first step is like the hardest thing for a lot of people, right? Like it's really, really hard. And so for like me, like with the podcast, it was the same thing. I had like Miguel from SoCal Watch Reviews and Eric from Rico's Watches and a bunch of guys like, dude, just get a mic and get a set of headphones and you know. And when I started this thing, I was on my laptop from 2014. When that thing was like there was no way I could do video on it like what I'm doing now. There was no way. And but I just started recording audio and just got in the habit of doing it and wrote scripts and I used my stuff that's my strong suits myself. And like you talked earlier about how like, your girlfriend tells you, well, yeah, you weren't perfect, but you did it, right? And that's what matters, bro. Because we have a saying like in the Navy about damage control, right? And it's a joke kind of, but you only got to be like 80% effective to stop the ship from sinking. And if you stop the ship from sinking, no one's going to be like, oh, you did a really ugly job of stopping the ship from sinking. No one's going to say that. They're going to be like, hey, man, good job stopping the ship from sinking. And you're like, yeah, right. And then you learn from it and you get better over time. So, like even like coming on a podcast, because this is like your first interview, right?
yeah,
Yeah. So that's like a step in the right direction too, because like, people are going to see about your page and stuff. And that's what I try to do with this, right? It's like I saw your feed. I dig it. It's positive, and I want to be able to like, if I have this platform, and I hate even using that term, if I got this my platform, but if I can get someone's stuff out there and let a wider audience see it, like even if it's like 50 more followers, right? But you get some engagement from that. Who knows who you get to meet? And someone else wants you on your podcast, and then maybe that leads to your own podcast, right? Because I think like there's a tie in there with you know what you're talking about, and then what you show is kind of just I don't know, it's positive, man. I can't stress that enough.
there's
It's just a
definitely
positive.
there's definitely something that I wouldn't mind doing with that. When I start to talk to people about stoicism, I bought that book, The Daily Stoic, for people, and when they come back to me and they say like, holy crap, like I read this and it really resonated, and then you really start to see a change in their thought process. how they manage themselves. I get fulfillment out of it. I don't want to like sound like some pokey person that's all like, "Oh, I love healing,"
Yeah.
but like, I think it's pretty cool when somebody reads something or you help somebody out in a way, and you see that light bulb go on,
Yeah.
and then you see them making those changes in themselves, because that's
Yeah.
really what this is. You're reading it, and you're literally helping yourself.
Yeah. No,
Uh,
it's a great point because that's kind of what we do in our respective communities, right? Like people don't realize that whether it's a veteran community or any of that stuff, like you do a lot of training, right? And there's a lot of times where someone doesn't understand a concept and then you're able to train the person or at least maybe they're like a real self-starter. You just give them the resource. Here's the resource. And they come back to you in a couple of days and they're like, "Oh man, yeah, I get this now." Right? And then over time, like 3 weeks later, like you don't have a discussion, but because you're the one that helped them out and you work with them all the time, you see that switch flip for them. And the way they operate is entirely different. And it's easy, and maybe it's easier for them, or they're happier with their work and stuff like that. And I don't think it's hokey at all. I think it's something that's intrinsic into our communities and how we kind of operate, right? Like tough love. I can't tell you how many times there's someone's like, "Hey, dummy, you know, do this." And you're like, "Oh yeah, I'll just do that." Right. And then 3 weeks later or 4 weeks later, they come back and like, "Hey man, I noticed you've been doing that. Great job. Do you have any other questions?" They follow up kind of thing, right? Leadership 101. No, I don't think it's hokey at all. I think it's a great thing. And yeah, pretty cool stuff, man. Um, so one of my favorite questions, well, is are there any underrated references or indispensable references that you would recommend? I'll include them in the show notes. They won't be affiliate links; they'll be just links for people to use. I don't get anything from them, and I don't think you do. But any indispensable or underrated references that you would recommend for anyone that's interested in stoicism?
I mean, kind of like how I started Google, even Pinterest, and you get some cool photos that are like, underneath the quotes. So you know, you can even make it a screensaver on your phone. But Google, for sure. I mean, you can literally research and look up anything on Google. You can find a Stoic quote and Google that and get the explanation for it. You can get multiple explanations for it, because one quote, I might uh, kind of decipher it in one way and understand it in one way, and somebody might understand it in a completely different way. And you know what? We're probably both right. Uh, the Daily Stoic, it's a crash course. It's a really good place to start. And if you're going through some stuff, and that's probably why you're finding Stoicism, you want to kind of manage yourself better, manage your thought process better. The Daily Stoic is a really good idea. You should probably get that, and definitely get the companion journal.
Awesome. Yeah, daily. I'll put links to those in the show notes. I have them both, and they are really good books. Um, I was like, I just want to read meditations first, and
And it's simple. It's not like you're not reading pages at a time. The expectation is one quote a day.
yeah, yeah, it's real
So
succinct, man. It's organized really well. The layout, I like it. So my favorite question to ask anyone, because it is a watch centric podcast, and we'll close out with this question. What's your Grail piece?
I don't have one. I really like the Rolex Sea Dweller,
Oh, it's cool.
but I'm also really into Panerai as well. So
Yeah,
the PAM 564 is nice. I generally like ones with a dive bezel, but I really like the simplicity of that one. And their submersible line, especially the cargo techs, those are pretty cool. I
yeah.
think they made a 42 millimeter one at one point. So definitely that.
I like the Sea Dweller, man. Um, and that's essentially like the more capable submariner, right?
Yeah.
That's the gist. Yeah, I like that thing a lot. If I got a Rolex, well, if I got a Rolex, it'd be the Explorer too. But I get liking the Sea Dweller because it's it's kind of it sounds so cheesy, but like you go to a room and everyone's got submariners or submariners, and they're like, "Oh, what's that?" You're like, "Oh, it's my Sea Dweller," and everyone's like, "Oh, this dude's a little more serious than the rest."
Well, they're cool. There's no Cyclops,
Yeah,
and the like minute markers go all the way around. So like that's a tool watch right there.
yeah,
Uh, I just like it. I like the Submariner too, but there's just something about the Sea Dweller that draws me more towards that. And then I kind of just like the look and the design of the Panerai. I like the weird cushion case. It's not kind of like the Seiko cushion case. It's kind of
Yeah.
like it's different. And then you got the whole, crown guard and the sub-second dial.
Hmm.
So with those two for sure.
Good choices, man. Panerai's cool. I still haven't seen one. I don't think in real life, but
I've
I
seen
will
a
one
few.
day.
I've seen a few in real life, not like up close, but while I'm working and somebody will walk by, I'll be like, "Holy crap, that's a Panerai. That looks nice."
Yeah,
One day.
like, excuse me, sir. I'd like to see your Panerai, please. He's like, what? No, good choices, man. Well, Joel, it was a pleasure having you on. Is there anywhere other than Instagram that people can find you, or is it pretty much Instagram?
Right now it's just Instagram. I'm probably at some point going to make a website when I get more into the straps things. I've thought it out a little bit. I'll probably have like a cheaper rubber option, not cheap, but more cost effective entry level.
Yeah,
And then I'll go with the premium leather. I think at that point is when I'll really start looking at building a website or having one built. So for right now, it's just Stoic Movements on Instagram.
got it. Well, I'll tell you what. When you're ready to do that website, hit me up and I'll help you out because I have a Squarespace site. This podcast is not sponsored by Squarespace, but let me tell you something. It's ridiculously easy. It's there's like a 12-minute learning curve, and then you're in. You're just like firing on all cylinders.
I
It's insane,
definitely,
man. Yeah,
I'm not tech savvy at all, so that
it,
sounds really good to me.
as a guy who started out on WordPress and wanted to punch myself in the face every 5 minutes, I ported over to Squarespace, which was a pain, but was worth every minute of it because it was an obstacle, which means it was an opportunity. And I just did it. And once I did it, it was over. But I'll save you that trouble. Just go to Squarespace. It's probably the easiest thing. But yeah, I hope you out when you get there. Well, Joel, I appreciate you I appreciate you coming on, man. And I'm glad I got to share your story and what you're doing and stoicism with a little bit of it, an intro, a little teaser for everyone. If anyone's interested that's watching, go check out Joel at Stoic Movements. I'll put the links in the show notes. And like I said, open invitation for next time, man. When we start doing the watch chats, open invitation. I always let everybody know that comes on. Especially a Panerai guy, because I don't think I have a Panerai person. So it'd be cool to have someone that knows a little bit about Panerai to have on and talk about it.
Oh, definitely, that sounds awesome. I'd love to.
Yeah. And thanks again, Joel, and to everyone watching. Hope you have a good night. And remember, at watchrolling.com, you make the watch. The watch doesn't make you.